In this next section of the book, Imam al-Hafiz al-Ghani al-Maqdisi concludes a very, very brief biography of the Prophet ﷺ. Of course, what to follow is more personal information of relatives and campaigns, etc. But after the migration to Al-Madinah, the next section has to do with the passing of the Prophet ﷺ. The passing of the beloved Messenger ﷺ was considered, and still is considered, the tragedy of the Ummah. And there will be no more tragic occurrence than that. And of course, leading up to that passing, the Prophet ﷺ was given indication, divine indication, that his time was soon to end. And that was through a number of revealed verses. One of those being, إِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ لَمَيِّتُونَ. When Allah says, indeed you are dying as they have died. Also the verse, الْيَوْمَ أَكْمَلْتُ لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَأَتْمَمْتُ عَلَيْكُمْ نِعْمَتِي وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا. Today I have completed for you my favor upon you, essentially perfecting for you your way of life, and I'm pleased with you, or I'm pleased with Islam as your religion. This was also an indication that his mission was going to conclude, and at the conclusion of everything there is an end to perfection, as perfection is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also one of the chapters in Juz Amma, which many of us are familiar with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ, when the victory of Allah comes and the opening of the city. وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا, and when you see that people enter the religion in droves or in waves, فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَاسْتَغْفِرْهُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ تَوَّابًا, then glorify your Lord with praise and seek his forgiveness. Indeed, he is oft forgiving or repentant. And it was reported by Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma that when this verse was revealed, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ, and this was during the days of Tashriq, during the Hajj of the Prophet ﷺ, and the days of Tashriq, they are the days after Eid. The Prophet ﷺ knew that this was the farewell by the revelation of these verses. There were other indications that he himself gave to his fellow companions that his passing was approaching. One of those was with the great companion Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu. Mu'adh, who was one of the close companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and he was also the companion that was sent to Yemen to invite the people of Yemen to Islam and to stay with them, to teach them faith. And so when the Prophet ﷺ was sending Mu'adh to Yemen and giving him advice about his journey and what he should do and what he should expect, Mu'adh was on his mount, camel, and the Prophet ﷺ was on the ground. And they were facing towards Yemen. And he said to Mu'adh, I'm worried that you fear that we will not meet again after this year. Or he said, I hope that one day you will pass by my masjid, or you will pass by my grave. And having said that, Mu'adh, he began to cry in anticipation of the Prophet's passing. And then the Prophet ﷺ turned away from Mu'adh and faced back towards the city. The scholars of hadith, they say that he turned away from Mu'adh in this very emotional response to avoid it becoming overly emotional And he said to Mu'adh, Inna awla an-nas bi al-muttaqun. Man kanu wa haythu kanu. The people that are more rightful to me are the pious, whoever they are and wherever they be. An indication to Mu'adh that he may very well not see the Prophet ﷺ, but his connection to the Prophet ﷺ was not based on proximity, but it was based on piety. So even though he was traveling to Yemen and the Prophet ﷺ was anticipating his passing, very, very, very likely to happen while he was gone, that the connection still was there between him and this great companion. And this hadith was reported by Imam Ahmad, his collection al-Musnad. It's another narration you can find. This is found Sahih Bukhari wa Muslim. This narration was reported by Aisha radiyallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ. And she said that Fatima, his daughter, radiyallahu anha, she came in, and this was among a group of women, and she was walking like her father, and he was there. And when she came in, he greeted her and had her sit on his right side. And then he said on the right side or on the left side. And then he whispered into her ear a secret. And Fatima, she began to cry. And Aisha, watching this, was thinking, what did he say to make his own daughter cry? And moments after that, he whispered into her ear and said something that made her laugh. And Aisha commented on this and said she had never seen happiness follow such sadness in such a short period of time than she had seen on that day. And of course, she wanted to know what it was. And immediately after the exchange, she asked Fatima what her father told her to make her cry, and then told her afterwards to make her laugh. And of course, Fatima refused to divulge what she considered to be a secret of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And Aisha, she persisted and was not given the answer until after his passing. So Fatima essentially waited and held on to that secret until the Prophet ﷺ passed away. And she told Aisha that her father whispered into her ear, saying, Jibreel used to come to me once a year and review the Quran. But this year, the year of that secret, he came to me twice. And I understand from that nothing except that my time has come. And he said to her, you will be the first of my household to follow me. Meaning, you will be the first of my family to follow me in death. And this caused her to cry. And then he said, will you not be happy to be the leader of the women in paradise? The women of the believers. And at hearing this, she began to laugh. The Prophet ﷺ, at the end of his life, the cause of his death, if you will, it was that he fell ill. He fell extremely ill, and part of the illness was the remnants of poison that he consumed sometime before. A woman fed or attempted to feed the companions a poisoned sheep. And she prepared for them this meal in order to kill the Prophet ﷺ and whoever was with him. And the Prophet ﷺ ate from that sheep before anyone else did. And having ingested just a little bit of it, he was prevented from consuming any more and told the companions to raise their hands because he was told that it had been poisoned. And this is what he said himself when he was in the last moments of his life on his deathbed, that what he had eaten at Khaybar, this is where it was consumed, continued to cause him pain and discomfort. But the Prophet ﷺ, believe it or not, as a prophet, he chose death over this world. And this was something that was reported also in Sahih Bukhari wa Muslim, reported by Sa'id al-Khudri, or Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. The Prophet ﷺ was preaching to the people and said that Allah had made his servant choose between this world and between the reward waiting with him, Allah subhanahu. And the servant has chosen what is with Allah. And among the audience was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and having heard that, he began to cry. He began to cry, and the companions that were there, they noted their astonishment of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq for crying at that moment. Because Abu Bakr as-Siddiq knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's requiring the servant to choose between this life and the next, it was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that was being made to choose. He knew that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was talking about himself, that Allah had essentially obligated the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to choose between to continue to live or to come to grips with his time on earth. And the Prophet ﷺ, of course, chose the reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in paradise. And Abu Bakr, he understood that right away. And the companions, many of them did not. And so they were astonished at this, and they noted that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was the most knowledgeable among them. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ, he was assured of his place in paradise before his passing, as was reported in Sahih Bukhari. As Aisha, she related that the Prophet ﷺ, when he was well, before the illness, he said that there is not a prophet whose soul is taken from his body until he is shown his seat or his destination in the paradise. And then either he lives or he makes a choice, meaning to embark upon the journey to the home of the hereafter. And when in the month of Al-Rabi' al-Awwal is when he fell ill, and he of course was married to multiple wives at the time, and while he was ill, he desired to be taken care of in the house of Aisha. And so he sought permission from his other wives to spend the last of his days in her home. Because the wives, they have rights over their husband, and they had already determined kind of a schedule of visitation, and now he needed their permission to cancel that schedule and spend the time with Aisha in her home. And so of course they all agreed and granted him their permission. And it was in that home that he remained for close to 2 weeks, ill, being nursed by Aisha radiallahu anha. And during his illness, he ordered that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq lead the congregational prayers. He went through numerous bouts of pain and discomfort, and when he was going through those moments of discomfort and pain, he would recite over himself the last few chapters of the Quran, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, which are used to perform ruqyah. And a person can do that over themselves. And so the Prophet ﷺ would do that. His wife, Aisha, would wipe his head and moisten his lips with a damp cloth to kind of help alleviate some of the suffering that he was going through. And on the last day of his life, the companions, they were there in the masjid, and as you know, the masjid is connected, or I should say the Prophet's house is connected to the masjid. There is a doorway in which he would enter into the masjid. And so moments before he passed away, he opened the curtain of his door and he looked out, and the companions there getting ready for prayer. And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was going to lead them in prayer, and they all noticed that he had opened the door and almost couldn't control their excitement to see him. And Abu Bakr was beginning to move back into the ranks to stand as if the Prophet was coming out, and he gestured to them to continue with their prayer, and Abu Bakr led them in another prayer while the Prophet ﷺ was still alive and in his home. And then shortly thereafter, the Prophet ﷺ, he raised his head to the sky while he was lying in the lap of his wife Aisha, resting his head on her thigh. He raised his head or his sight to the heavens, and he says, Allahumma ar-Rafiq al-A'la, O Allah, to the loftiest of companionship, and he passed away. And as the Imam Hafid Abdul-Ghani al-Maqdisi says he died when he was 63 years old. Some say that he was 65 or 60. But the first view is what is correct. He was 63. His death occurred on a Monday during mid-morning after 12 nights had passed in the month of Rabi' al-Awwal. Some say it was after 2 nights had passed during the beginning of the month. So here you can see the 12th of Rabi' al-Awwal on a Monday is when he passed. He was buried on Wednesday night. Some say it was a Tuesday. And his illness before death had lasted for 12 days, though some say it was 14. His body was washed by Ali ibn Abi Talib, his uncle al-Abbas, al-Fadl ibn al-Abbas, Qutham ibn al-Abbas, Usam ibn Zayd, Shukran, his freed slave, and the process was attended by Aus ibn Khawla al-Ansari. He was shrouded with 3 pieces of cloth from a city in Yemen. There was no shirt or turban. The Muslims then offered the funeral prayer individually without an imam. As you know, the funeral prayer is offered in congregation. There's an imam, and then there's the congregation behind, and the imam leads everyone in prayer. But for the Prophet ﷺ, it's different, so that it was not that a congregation was being led over him. He was the imam. And so people would come and offer their funeral prayer individually there in his home, and they would take turns offering that prayer. A piece of red velvet that he used to cover himself with was spread underneath him. Al-Abbas, Ali, Fadl ibn al-Abbas, Qutham, and Shukran entered his grave, which was covered with 9 stone blocks. So those are the ones that helped move him into the grave, and then they covered that grave. He was buried under the place of his bed he was in when he died, and the niche was dug in the grave of the home of Aisha radiallahu anha. Later, Abu Bakr and Omar would be buried next to him in the house of Aisha radiallahu anha. And this is, in short, some of the story regarding the passing of the Prophet ﷺ. Jazakallah khair. Wa sallallahu sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.